Why Charles Oliveira will overpower Mateusz Gamrot.
His name is plastered across the UFC record books. You likely know the credentials by now. Most submissions and finishes in UFC history.
From the moment the first bell rings, he's coming at you. Guns blazing. He doesn't fight safe. He doesn't fight to outpoint you. There's no one that's been like that.
How did he become this guy? He is legitimately one of the best fighters I have ever seen in my entire life.
Mateusz Gamrot, ladies and gentlemen.
This guy is a guy that could be potentially down the line fighting for the UFC championship. He has that level of skill.
Gamrot vs Oliveira are set for the main event of UFC Rio, and although Charles is making a quick comeback after getting knocked out recently to Ilia Topuria, I'm here to tell you that Charles will still overpower Mateusz Gamrot. But quickly, before we get the video started, my name is JuicyMMA, I make opinionated MMA content, and if you guys are interested in videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, as only 10% of you watching are actually subscribed. And also, if you guys are enjoying the content and want to support the channel, be sure to hit that join button for members only live streams, videos, alongside with other perks as well. But anyways, let's get into it. Originally, we were supposed to have Rafael Fiziev go up against Charles Oliveira for the main event of UFC Rio. And this was an exciting but also a very dangerous matchup for Charles Oliveira specifically. The fight itself probably would have been amazing, as both Charles as well as Rafael Fiziev always go for the finish and are always in very entertaining fights. But the real concern for Charles Oliveira was due to the fact that he was knocked out not too long ago by Ilia Topuria. And because he's making such a quick turnaround, there was a lot of concern around how well Charles Oliveira's chin would eventually hold up from some of the bombs that Rafael Fiziev might land. But after Fiziev had to pull out with an injury, the replacement was Mateusz Gamrot. And although a lot of the concern of Charles's chin holding up isn't nearly as important going into this fight against Mateusz Gamrot, at the end of the day, Charles went from fighting a pure striker to fighting a pure grappler, which is a significant change and is something that he's going to need to make adjustments to very quickly. But before we get into this matchup specifically, let's take a look at Charles Oliveira's game to see what he does so effectively out there. So in my opinion, when you look at Charles Oliveira, he's one of, if not the most versatile fighters in the entire UFC. On the feet, Charles Oliveira is very technical and very effective, as he does a really good job at throwing out a lot of different weapons. Whether that's a leg kick, whether that's a front kick to the body, whether that's a head kick, whether that's a jab, right hand, left hook, uppercut, right overhand, there's so many different weapons that Charles Oliveira can go to. And I think we saw it specifically in a lot of different fights, but when you look back at his matchup against Dustin Poirier, he did a really good job at utilizing a lot of his weapons and utilizing a lot of his weapons at the same time. And essentially what that does is it confuses his opponents, as his opponents don't necessarily know what shot is coming next, and based on that unpredictability, Charles is then able to land some big shots on the feet, and that's how he's able to find a lot of his finishes. Now, outside of just the versatility, the fact that Charles has so much power both in his hands and in his legs of course puts everything together, but I do think the overall versatility that Charles Oliveira has on the feet is a huge reason for why he's so effective. Now, outside of just Charles's stand-up game, he also is a tremendous grappler. He was actually a grappler before he was even a striker. And in terms of his grappling, Charles has it all. He has really good wrestling, which is something he's done a great job at making significant improvements to ever since he's joined the UFC, but also when the fight is on the ground, Charles has amazing jiu-jitsu, as he does a really good job at landing nice ground and pound shots from top, but also he does a great job at finding those submissions. Whether it's a rear naked choke, whether it's a leg lock, whether it's an arm bar, he's able to find it all, and Charles does so very quickly and very effectively. So overall, when you look at the game of Charles Oliveira, it's very clear wherever the fight goes, he'll have an advantage over his opponent. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why specifically do I think Charles Oliveira is going to overpower Mateusz Gamrot? Well, in my opinion, this comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is the striking. Because on the feet, Charles is going going to have a significant advantage in all aspects. In terms of the technical ability, Charles is significantly more technical and is just a better striker overall compared to Mateusz Gamrot, but also even in terms of the danger factor or the physicality, Charles is way more physical than Mateusz Gamrot is. So essentially, I think Charles is going to feel very free on the feet. As I said, he's more technical than Mateusz Gamrot is, so I do think he's going to start to utilize a lot of that versatility that he does possess on the feet, whether it's a teep kick, whether it's a leg kick, whether it's a left hook, right hand jab, whatever it is, Charles is going to feel very free in order to throw a lot of those strikes. But also because Mateusz Gamrot isn't all that physical at all or all that dangerous, I do think it is going to be very freeing for Charles Oliveira, and he's not going to be nearly as concerned or as cautious on the feet than he would have been against a guy like Rafael Fiziev or against a different fighter at the lightweight division. So essentially, the longer the fight stays on the feet, the better it's going to go for Charles Oliveira, and I think if this fight is on the feet for an extended period of time, Charles is going to find a finish one way or the other. Now, the next reason for why I think Charles is going to overpower Gamrot is actually in part due to Gamrot himself, because going into this fight, a lot of people rightfully point out that Mateusz Gamrot is an elite wrestler, which he is. Gamrot does a really good job at shooting in quickly for shots and finding a lot of takedowns, even on very high level wrestlers and grapplers. But the one thing that Gamrot doesn't do all that well is have great control. We see this in a lot of Gamrot's fights. Even if he's not necessarily going up against a high level grappler, a lot of guys are easily able to get back to their feet. Yes, maybe Gamrot will shoot in for a million takedowns and win the fight that way. That's honestly a way how he's able to win a lot of fights, but because he doesn't have great control, I do think that is going to be a big factor in this fight with Charles. Because as I said before, if Charles is able to get the fight back to the feet, it's an advantage for him. But even on the ground, if Charles is able to flip position and he gets on top, that's going to be a real danger for Mateusz Gamrot, as Charles can land some big ground and pound shots from top position, or more importantly, Charles can start to threaten a lot of submissions, and I wouldn't be surprised if Charles is able to even find a submission if he does get top position on the ground. So I do think the overall lack of control that Mateusz Gamrot has or doesn't have is definitely going to be a huge factor in this fight versus Charles Oliveira. But the next factor for why I think Charles Oliveira is going to overpower Mateusz Gamrot is due to the fact that this fight is 5 rounds, because we honestly see this in a lot of Gamrot's fights. But early on, he's able to do a really good job at finding takedowns and winning the fight for the most part, but it only takes one big shot from his opponents. We saw it in his fight against Jalen Turner. Although Gamrot won that fight, as the fight did progress, Turner was landing more and more big shots. We saw it in a lot of other Mateusz Gamrot fights as well, and I do think specifically looking at this matchup between him and Charles, the fact that it is a longer 5-round fight just gives more potential opportunities for Charles to land a big shot on the feet or flip position on the ground, land big shots there, and find a finish. And also considering that Charles has shown some really good cardio throughout his career, and especially as of late, I do think the fact that the fight is longer actually ironically favors Charles Oliveira. But if I had to give my official prediction for this matchup, I would lean towards a second or third finish victory for Charles Oliveira, all predicated based off his success on the feet. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this fight. But I will say, in a division, in a lightweight division, where all these other contenders are kind of just waiting to see what Ilia Topuria does, it is definitely refreshing to see a fighter like Charles Oliveira. When he was champion, he was super active. When he wasn't champion, he was super active. And even at this point, after taking a pretty significant knockout versus Ilia Topuria, Charles is still very active. And as I said before, he's actually even fighting before Ilia Topuria did. And Ilia in that fight essentially took no damage. So there is a lot of respect that needs to be given out to Charles for not only taking this fight initially against Rafael Fiziev, but even accepting a fight on short notice against a completely different stylistic opponent in Mateusz Gamrot to essentially save this card. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Charles Oliveira is going to overpower Mateusz Gamrot, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.